My phone hit the floor. I had knocked it off the nightstand reaching for my water in the dark. 2:47 in the morning, the clock glowing on the wall, and when I picked it up the screen was already lit with a message from my daughter Clara. "Dad, why do you live like this now?" I sat at the edge of the bed and stared at those 7 words for a long time. Not because I didn't have an answer. Because the answer was going to change everything between us. I set the phone down, and in the quiet of that dark room I said the truest thing I had said in years. "This isn't new, Clara. I just stopped pretending. I am 74 years old, and what I am about to tell you is something I spent most of those years completely blind to. Not because I was unintelligent, not because I was weak, but because the trap I was living inside was so well disguised as discipline and respectability that I had mistaken it for identity. I had mistaken the performance for the man. And I want to tell you exactly how I finally saw through it. Because the moment I did, it cost me a confrontation I was not ready for, a conversation that broke something open in my chest, and a realization at 4 in the morning that I am still sitting with today. Stay with me, because this is where it gets real. For most of my adult life, I was the kind of man people pointed to as an example. Up at 5:45 every morning, pressed shirt even on days with nowhere to go. Guest room kept immaculate for guests who came perhaps twice in 15 years. Career in local government, stable, respectable, the kind of profession that made people nod with approval when you mentioned it at dinner. "Daniel is so disciplined," they said. "Daniel always does things right." And I believed them. That is the part that haunts me now. I took their admiration, and I wore it like proof that the choices I had made were the correct ones, that the life I was living was genuinely mine. It never once occurred to me to ask whether I had actually chosen any of it, or whether I had simply built a life that was optimized for the approval of people who were, in truth, barely watching. I was not living. I was being approved. And I had no idea, not even a shadow of an idea, until my daughter stood in my kitchen and looked at me like I was a stranger. Clara arrived on a Tuesday with her son Marcus, my grandson, 26 years old. They walked through my home with the careful, slightly uncomfortable energy of people who have noticed something they cannot immediately name. Marcus stopped in the doorway of what used to be the guest room. It was a reading room now, books on the shelves, a comfortable chair by the window, the single bed replaced with something that served me rather than the imaginary guests I had been preparing for since Patricia died. "You've changed," he said. "You used to care about how things looked." Clara looked at the kitchen shelf, the good china, Patricia's china, sitting openly where I could reach it and use it instead of aging perfectly behind glass. "It feels like you've let go," she said. I looked at them both, and what I felt was not defensiveness. It was recognition. Because what they were describing, the disciplined, consistent, perfectly presented version of their father and grandfather, suddenly sounded, spoken out loud by people who loved me, exactly like what it had always been. A performance. A 50-year performance with no intermission, and no audience that had ever asked for it. That night I could not sleep. I sat in my reading chair with the lamp on, and I did something I had never done honestly before. I looked at the reasons behind my choices, not the choices themselves, the reasons. Why the 5:45 alarm? Not because my body wanted it, because disciplined men rose early and I had wanted, every day of my life, to be seen as a disciplined man. Why the pressed shirts on empty days? Because respectable men dressed respectably, and I had wanted the mirror to confirm my respectability even when nobody else was looking. Why 15 years of an immaculate guest room? I sat with that one the longest. Because the only person that room had ever served was the imaginary audience I had been performing for since I was young enough to understand that certain choices made people nod and certain choices made them frown. Then I went further back. The career I had stayed in for 40 years, had I chosen it or had I chosen the identity that came with it? The business idea I had declined at 29 because the risk of being seen to fail had felt more dangerous than the certainty of a smaller life. The answer arrived quietly. The way true things arrive, not as a revelation, but as a recognition of something that was always there, waiting for you to be still enough to see it. I had built an entire life around approval. Not from any one person, from a generalized, ambient expectation that I had been performing for since childhood. A silent audience I had never questioned and never dismissed, and never, not once in 74 years, stopped performing for long enough to ask what I actually wanted. That was only the beginning of what I found. The changes had started 2 years before that night, slowly, one at a time. The sleep came first. I woke one April morning at 4:15, and my body was simply done, completely, genuinely rested. And instead of lying there waiting for the acceptable hour, I got up and made coffee and sat in the garden and watched the sky change through colors I had been sleeping through my entire life. I never set the alarm again. Then the clothes. I had a soft gray shirt at the back of my wardrobe, old, faded, weightless from years of washing, that I had kept hidden because it was not the kind of shirt a serious man wore. I started wearing it every day, and nothing happened. The world did not register a change. The ambient audience either did not notice or had never been watching as carefully as I had always assumed. The guest room I converted in an afternoon. 15 years of immaculate maintenance ended in an afternoon, and what replaced it was the first room in my home that existed purely for me. The china came next. Patricia had bought it to be used to make ordinary meals feel like occasions. I had been saving it for occasions that never felt quite important enough. I took it out and I put it on the shelf where I could reach it, and I used it for Tuesday lunches and quiet Friday evenings and every ordinary day that was. I had finally understood the actual substance of my life. I started celebrating for no reason, decorating in February, playing music I actually wanted to hear, making something good for dinner on a Wednesday because it was a Wednesday and I was alive in it. I stopped explaining my small preferences to people, stopped narrating my choices as though every decision required a defense, stopped filing the daily petition for permission to be myself. And I kept taking risks, new investments, new learning, new willingness to put something on the line for an outcome that was not guaranteed, because impermanence is not an argument for smallness. It is an argument for presence. Clara came back 3 days later. She sat at the kitchen table, and she looked at me with the expression of a woman who has prepared what she is going to say, and is already uncertain about whether it was the right preparation. "Dad, this isn't you." I waited. "You used to be better than this." That word, better. I let it sit in the room, then I said, "No, I used to be easier to understand." She looked at me. Everything I did made sense to everyone else, Clara. The routine, the shirts, the room I kept perfect for 15 years, the career I stayed in without ever asking whether it was actually what I wanted. It was all legible. People could look at my life and know what it meant and feel comfortable with what they read. I paused, but I don't think any of it ever actually belonged to me. The kitchen was completely quiet. I got up and took 2 cups from Patricia's good china, and I made fresh tea, and I set them on the table between us. Clara looked at them. Then she looked at me, and something in her face changed in a way that told me she had understood something she had not known she needed to understand. We drank the tea out of the good cups. And we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Marcus came back a week later, alone. We sat in the garden in the autumn light, and he was quiet for a long time. Then he said, I think I'm still doing that. I looked at him. Living the way you used to live. The job, the flat, the way I dress. I chose all of it for how it would look, not because I wanted it. He paused. Is it too late to stop? I looked at this young man, 26 years old, already carrying the weight I had carried for 50, and I said, "You are 26. The only people for whom it is too late are the ones who never see it at all." I went back inside as the light was going, sat in my chair, the same lamp, the same quiet. But something in the room was different. The feeling of a space that has finally been told the truth. Some people look at my life now and call it change. I call it a return. Not to something I lost. I am not sure I ever had it. A return to the man who was always underneath the performance. The man who wanted soft mornings and good china on ordinary days and the freedom to choose without explaining. He was always there. I was just too busy being approved to meet him. Some people call it change. I call it returning to myself. If this reached something in you like this video, 1 second, it puts this in front of someone who is still performing and does not yet know it. Subscribe for more stories that tell the truth quietly. And leave me a comment. What is the one thing you have been doing not because you want it, but because someone decided it was what a person like you was supposed to do? Tell me. That answer might be the beginning of something you have been waiting a very long time to start.